Computer. Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And this is where we are holding. So we've got now, we were talking about the trumpets before, and now again, all in terms of, if you think of it, the entire subject is about getting ready to enter the land of Israel, to land of Canaan at the time, and to go through the conquest. And I need whoever is not muted to please mute. So, Vayhi bashana hashenit, and so it was in the second year, B'chodesh hasheni, in the second month, Be'esrim b'chodesh, on the 20th day of the month, Na'ala ha'anan, the cloud was lifted, Me'al mishkan ha'edut, from above the tabernacle of the testimony. And of course, the testimony refers to the 10 Commandments. Excuse me. Rashi. B'chodesh hasheni, the second month. Nimtzeit ata omer, so you can deduce from this, right? Literally, it means it is you find, okay, that you can say, Shnei asar chodesh, 12 months, chaser yud yamim, less 10 days. So in other words, about 344 days. Asu bechorev, they were encamped at Chorev, at Mount Sinai. Essentially, Chorev is another name for Mount Sinai. Shehare, and he gives you the calculation. By Rosh Chodesh Sivan Chanusham, because we know that they came there, they arrived and encamped there on the first day. It says of the second month, and that's Sivan. Of the third month. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, right? And that's why, by the way, Shavuot is on the 6th of Sivan, right? This third month. So they came on the first day of the third month. Velo nasu, and they did not journey ad Isrim b'Iyar until the 20th of Iyar, which is the month they're talking about here, L'shana haba'ah, in the following year. So in the first year, they arrived in the first day of the third month. In other words, it took them about 60 days coming from Egypt to Mount Sinai. And that's because they didn't just keep marching. They went slowly on their way to that point. I put down the months of the Hebrew year here. So the first month is Nisan, second is Iyar, third is Sivan, and all the rest of them here. So in the first year, they arrived on the 1st of Sivan. That's right here, right? And they departed, went through the rest of the year. And then that's what we just read here, that in that first anniversary of the first Pesach, they observed the Pesach. And then they left on the 20th of this month. So they arrived on the 1st of this month, left on the 20th of this month a year later. And so months have approximately 30 days in them, or 29 days. A lunar month is approximately very close to 29 and a half days. So the way you count it out is that one month is 29 and the next month is 30. And that way you take care of those half days. So at any rate, we know that's how Rashi gets what he got, that calculation. And these names, by the way, are basically exilic names. They are Babylonian, they're from Babylonia. And on occasion, there are some of the months that are mentioned, which are given other names in the Bible. So this is known as Aviv, for example. And I don't remember offhand just some of the other names, but we don't have all 12 that I'm aware of in the Bible, mentioned in the Bible, just a number of them. So they were there for almost a year, getting ready, getting set up so that they could go into the land of Canaan and fulfill that promise that had been made to Abraham so many centuries before. Vayis'u v'nei Yisrael l'masehem. So the children of Israel journeyed according to their journeys from the wilderness of Sinai. Vayishkon ha'anan b'midbar paran. And the cloud kept moving until it came to Midbar Paran. Well, Midbar Paran is where things start to fall apart. And we have the complaints of the Israelites. And there is such a powerful message about complaining and not hearing within ourselves the fact that we're complaining, and of course, always justified, in ourselves. I mean, we wouldn't complain if we didn't feel that we had a right to complain. So it's a really major theme, sadly, in terms of how things just start to fall apart. It's one thing to I would say, to be honest and to give an assessment. Complaining is something else. I think complaining has a certain psychological value to it, to complaining. And I suspect that could be explored as to, the very act of complaining is something that is filling a need that a person might have, as opposed to seeing something wrong and having an attitude that I want to try and take care of this. So, if you see something wrong, theoretically at any rate, right, assuming that there aren't other kinds of complexities, complaining is one thing, taking care of a situation is a separate thing. Complaining is basically how you feel about it, and being able to detach the one from the other, I think, is a major leap forward spiritually, and recognizing that you can be solution oriented. So you don't have to necessarily complain. I can tell you that there are things that happen to me, and I've started to try. I'm not saying I never complain. This is something I'd be speaking a falsehood about myself if I were to say that. But I know that sometimes I try to chuckle at these kinds of situations in terms of, this is life. Life happens this way, and where possible, to be solution oriented, as opposed to sort of trying to fix everything. You can't fix everything, but solution is a broader term, I think, which tries to encompass something beyond the specific that went wrong. So just some stuff to think about, but this all starts to happen in Midbar Paran, and we'll check to see. There we go. So there's this circumlocution going on, and lemas ahem, according to their journeys. So here he goes. Kemishpat hameforash litmasa diglehem. Okay, so he says, according to what was set up, that was expressed prior to this, right? According to each flag, each standard's time to be part of this journey. Mi Rishon, who was going to be the first, who was the first tribe to move, okay, and to go on the journey, or Mi Acharon, and who would be the last one. And we're actually told this in just a moment. Bemidbar Paran. So he says the wilderness of Paran. And Rashi mentions the specific complaint that the Israelites complained about. And the place is also known as Kivrot, the graves, Hata'ava, of those who lusted, and here in this case, they were complaining about the food. They were complaining about the food. That's still to this day. You go to a convention, and if the food isn't good, it affects the whole convention. On the other hand, if the food's outstanding, somehow the convention can still be worthwhile, at least for many people. So, Kivrot Hatava Bimidbar Paran Haya. This particular location that was named this was in the wilderness of Paran. Vesham Chanu Mimasa Zeh. And that's where they encamped from this particular journey. So, Yud Gimel 13. Vayisu Varishona, and they started off, they journeyed to begin with, Al Pi Hashem Beyad Moshe, at the behest of God and through Moses, right? We discussed that in a previous lesson as to what that meant, right? Vayisad Degel, so now we have it. Vayisad Degel Machane Bnei Yehuda Barishona Letziv Otam. And the standard, the banner of the camp of Judah journeyed, Isa, to begin with, Barishona, at the beginning, Letziv Otam, according to their hosts, literally, we'd say, right? So that was ranks. How about according to their ranks? The Al Tzava'o, and over his rank, Nachshon ben Aminadav, the famous Nachshon, the head of the chieftain of the tribe of Judah. And we also, along with them, remember there were three tribes camped on one side, the Al Tzava Mate Bnei Yisachar, and over the ranks of the tribe of the sons of Issachar, Netanel ben Suar, we're given his name, Netanel ben Suar, the Al Tzva Mate Bnei Zuvulun, these are the two tribes that went along with Judah, Eliav ben Chelon. So we're given these names of these various chieftains. For Al Tzva Mate Bnei, we had that. For Hurad HaMishkan, and at this point it says the tabernacle was taken down, okay, dismantled. Venasu, and the children, we'll have to wait a second, it's going to be the children of and the children of Gershon, these are the two Levitical families, Gershon, Uvnei Merari, and the sons of Merari, Nosei HaMishkan. Those two families, remember there were three families of Levites, and the third family are the children of Kahat. At any rate, Gershon, we have discussed already in Numbers the specific tasks of each one of these families, and they were responsible for basically the construction, the actual part of the tabernacle that represented the tent and the hangings and the boards of the tabernacle. They were the ones who were responsible. So they totally would dismantle the tabernacle. And there's some Rashi here. Vahurad HaMishkan, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was dismantled. Kevan shenosea degel Yehuda. So he says, since the encampment of Judah was on its journey, nichnasu Aharon uvanav, Aaron and his sons entered into the tabernacle. Ufarku et haparochet, they took down the ark cover, not the ark cover, the curtain in front of the Holy of Holies. V'chisu ba et ha'aron, and they used that cover, or rather the curtain of the ark to cover the ark. Shne'emar, as it states, and now this is back in chapter 4 of Numbers, Uva Aharon Uvanav, Aaron and his sons should come, Binsoa HaMachanot, when the encampment is on its journey, Uvnei Gershon, Uvnei Merari, and the children of Gershon and the children of Merari, Porkin HaMishkan, so they're the ones who then take apart, dismantle the tabernacle, V'to'in oto ba'agalot, and they carry it on the carts. We had talked about that too. V'ha'aron uchli hakodesh shel masa b'nei kahat, and the ark and all the sacred vessels, which were responsible for the burdens, the porterage of the children of Kahat, Omdim mechusin. They would remain there, but they were covered up by various cloths and tarps. V'netunin al hamotot. They're then placed on the poles. Ad nasa degel machane Reuven, until the encampment or the banner of the camp of Reuven was on its journey. And after this, v'nasu hakahatim, the Kohatites then carried and journeyed, or rather they themselves went and took these sacred vessels of the tabernacle. And remember, they carried everything on their shoulders. So look at how Rashi fills in all these details for us so that we can visualize a picture of what was going on here. So let's see. Yep, right. So Vanasa. So after the tabernacle itself was disassembled, dismantled, Vanasa degel machane Reuven letzivotam, and then the banner of the encampment of Reuven journeyed according to their ranks. The altzva'o, and over their ranks, Elitzur ben Shteur. These names have been mentioned before, but these are the chieftains mentioned again. The altzva mate bnei Shimon, and over the ranks of the tribe of the children of Shimon, Shlumiel ben Surishadai, Shlumiel son of Surishadai. The altzva mate bnei Gad, Eliasaph ben Deuel. And again, over the ranks of the tribe of the children of God, Eliasaph ben Deuel, Venasu, and now Venasu hakahatim. So let me make sure I've got this. We've got Reuven here, we've got Shimon, and we've got the children of God, those three tribes mentioned there. Venasu hakahatim nos'ei hamikdash. And now the Kohatites, the children of Kohat, carried, right? They journeyed. The nos'ei would be to carry the mikdash, the tabernacle. So the Kohatites, the ones who carried the tabernacle. Vehekimu et hamishkan ad bo'am, and they would, this is another people, these are talking actually about other people, they would set up the tabernacle until they arrived. So there are lots of pronouns here, and who they refer to, that's a good question. So we've got Rashi now to help us out. Nos'ei hamikdash. So again, those who carried the tabernacle, the sanctuary, I should say, right? Mishkan is the tabernacle, Mikdash is sanctuary. So he says, this is referring to the family of Kahat, Nos'ei Dvarim Hamakudashim. So you would understand Mikdash here as referring to the objects that were sanctified, the ones who carried the sanctified objects. Vehikimu et hamishkan. So it just says they, right? They set up the tabernacle. And Rashi tells us that the they refers to Bnei Gershon uvnei Merari. We're actually talking about the children of Gershon and the children of Merari. Shahayu kodmin lahem masa, shnei degalim. So it says because they would precede them by a journey of two banners, two standards. Hayu mekimin et hamishkan. So ahead of time here, they would set up the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Keshahaya ha'anan shochen, when the cloud would rest. V'siman ha'chaniya nir'eh, and the indication of the encampment, the time to set camp, nir'eh bedegel machane Yehuda, could be seen over the banner of the camp of Judah. Remember, we talked about how the cloud lay like a beam over the tribe of Judah when it was time for them to actually encamp. Vehem chonin, and they would encamp. V'adayin b'nei Kahat ba'im me'acharehem. And in the meantime, the children of Kahat would still be arriving after them, after these other tribes. Im shnei degalim ha'achoronim, they would come with the two banners, the last two banners. And that would be these banners of Ephraim and Dan. Hayu b'nei Gershon uvnei Merari, and in that period of time, the children of Gershon and the children of Merari mekimin et hamishkan. They would set up the tabernacle. Ukeshiba'im b'nei Kahat, and when the children of Kahat would arrive, motzim oto al mechono, they would see that it was all set up properly. Umachnisin bo ha'aron, and they would bring the ark inside. V'hashulchan, the table, the showbread table, v'amenorah, the candelabra, v'hamizbachot, and the altars. There was the gold altar on the inside and the bronze altar on the outside. V'zehu mashma'ut hamikra, and this is the intention. This is the meaning of this scriptural verse. V'hekimu, okay, mekimei hamishkan. That is, that the ones who were responsible for setting up the Mishkan set it up, oto, Mishkan oto, ad terem, before or until Bo'am shel b'nei Kahat, until the children of Kahat would arrive. So let's see. Okay, we got the last two tribes here. V'nasad, so totally needed Rashi to explain this particular sentence. Without the Rashi, we would be struggling with the pronouns and trying to understand what it was really trying to say. V'nasad degel machaneh b'nei Ephraim, and the standard of the encampment of the children of Ephraim would journey. They were litzivotam, according to their ranks, v'al tzva'o, and over their ranks, Elishama ben Amihud. V'al tzva matev bnei Menashe, and over the ranks of the tribe of the children of Menashe, Gamliel ben Pedatsur. Gamliel ben Pedatsur, his name. V'al tzva, and over the tribe, over the troop or the ranks, Matev bnei Binyamin, of the tribe of the children of Benjamin, Avidan ben Gidoni. Avidan ben Gidoni. That's simply his name. I think this would be a good place to stop for this, because we do have a little bit more to go, which would take us over time. So I'm going to put the arrow here, and God willing, tomorrow we will continue here. So I'm going to stop the share. Let's see. All right. Well, good to see all of you. Any comments, any thoughts about this? It's just an interesting description so that we can actually visualize the journey itself, the picture that Rashi fills in for us. He gives us the color of it. Yes, David?
Yeah, so you may have covered this in another session, but did the cloud also like conceal them? Because we're talking, I mean, you've got a whole bunch of people walking around, in there. So did it actually conceal them so that enemies or people, as they moved in and out through all of the, intricacies that we just were described, didn't notice them, right? Because there are probably other people around, especially as they got close, to Canaan. So yeah, just curious.
So it's a wonderful question. So as far as what we read, okay, it just essentially formed a beam over the tribe of Judah, and it led the Israelites.
Right.
The Israelites were following this cloud, but you're right. The idea was that the cloud also functioned in a way to protect them. The fire burned at night, in other words, so that if they needed to journey at nighttime, they had the light of the cloud, of the fire, to guide them on their way. I was thinking as you asked your question, and I was trying to develop the answer, that what happened was at a certain point, much later on, the Israelites, first of all, the news about what had happened in Egypt was something that the peoples all around, their neighboring nations had all heard. So that would put a certain fear into them. But also certainly later on, when they were actually able to defeat these two kings, Sichon and Og, and those two kings and their groups had been entrusted by all the people in Canaan, the tribes in Canaan, to protect them. They were on the border there to protect them. And when the Israelites defeated them, of course, you can imagine the terror now that entered the hearts of the inhabitants that were there. So I think, that we had the psychological part of it, but we also had, the point that you were making about the fact that they had the divine presence to protect them. So no, I would say no question about that. And by the way, I mean, it's such a good question that the whole point about, if you think about the Parsha that's coming up called Balak, which talks about the king who wanted to curse them, remember, who hired this heathen prophet Bilam to come and curse the Israelites. Okay.
Yep.
If you think about it, that whole narrative isn't done in the presence of the Israelites. I mean, in other words, how did this wind up in the Torah unless it was something told to Moses, assuming Moses wrote this down? But none of that happened in the presence of the Israelites. It's all done outside of it, that whole parsha. It's not, God telling the Israelites, etc., etc. And of course, so we have a parsha that speaks about the protection that God gives the Israelites and how deeply God protects them, to what degree. I mean, we'll discuss this more in detail when we get to Balak. And then at the end of it all, at the very end of that parsha, the Israelites couldn't, actually go ahead and then basically the Israelite men consort with the Moabite women, which is like such lack of appreciation for how they were being protected. And of course, then a plague breaks out and a lot of people die as a result of it. But it's basically an illustration of how little we appreciate, the miracles that occur to us that we're not even aware of. God protects us. So you raised obviously a major theme.
Yeah, and that's interesting, like you said, about the Parsha that takes place without anybody actually being there, right? So,
right. None of the Israelites, correct. There are no Israelites around.
That's fascinating.
That's right. I know. It's interesting. Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording at this point and thank those who have been joining us today.